with starting a business, your work ethic may directly translate into your success, or it may also not. And that's the reality that we don't often hear, because that's not the sexy thing. The sexy thing is like hustle, hustle, hustle. You'll make all the money, you'll have the Lambos, you'll have the chicks, and you'll have all this stuff, but you might also not. And that's what a lot of people kind of hide. They don't say. I don't want to tell you that you're going to fail. That's definitely not the message I'm trying to send here. But if you're looking for something where your work ethic will most typically translate into your earnings and your income, then sales is probably the route for you to go.
In today's world, seems like everybody wants to become an entrepreneur, wants to start a business and live that entrepreneurial lifestyle. And it's very rare that you see people advocating for the other path. You know, very rare that you see somebody saying, if you're hungry and motivated, go into sales, despite all the beautiful and amazing opportunities that it has. Which brings us to today's esteemed guest, Dylan Blues, my mentor, my partner, my brother. Dylan, you've built, scaled multiple successful businesses and you sold them. And I'm not going to talk numbers because I know you like to keep things low key, but your journey is fascinating because after living the entrepreneurial lifestyle and had massive success, you then transitioned into sales, into selling for other businesses, working hand in hand with one of the leading business coaches, consultants in the world, and scaling their businesses to multiple 7-8 figures in revenue. And so I thought to myself, who better to discuss this discussion, sales versus business, than you, since you've experienced best of both worlds, and maybe shed some light for our viewers, for individuals who are at a crossroad right now and not sure what route they need to take.
So let's kind of start this discussion with the reality of it and put a little disclaimer here. The truth is that, I've made a lot of money in sales, but at the end of the day, I'm still a business owner, right? So I'm going to try and keep this video as unbiased as possible, keep it completely honest, completely open-hearted and relatable as well, right? At the end of the day, I'll start by saying this. I think that the, entrepreneurial lifestyle has been glorified immensely by all these online coaches and consultants, some of which are our clients. And, I'm not shitting on them for that. I'm not hating on them for that. But what I will tell you is that this, lavish lifestyle, the exotic car lifestyle, the Lambos, the yachts, all that stuff is probably 5% of the time that they spend. The rest of the time is actually behind the scenes. It's working, it's operating the business, it's building, it's stressing. And those things you kind of never see. As we're gonna have this conversation, I want you to keep that in mind. I want you to understand that this whole shift recently with becoming an entrepreneur and building a business, although yes, you can make a lot of money, and yes, you could be one day very successful. Number one, the chances are slim. And number two, you don't see all the behind the scenes, right? So I really want you to keep that in mind. I will try and keep this video as honest as possible and not, have any bias in it. I probably will, nevertheless, but I'll try and keep it as real and as authentic as possible because I know that's what you guys want to see.
Right. Yeah. I mean, especially in our industry, it's all how to make business online, and you see new business model coming every 6 months. Like even right now, there's business models where it's like a faceless business that you can just throw on a YouTube channel, and you don't even have to have your face or your voice and just start a business. Yeah. But I think really the question that you would have to ask yourself is why are you getting into business, or why are you even getting into sales in the first place? Yeah. So from your experience, how do you feel like people should assess their personal goals and their visions so that they can decide what route to actually take?
That's a really good question. And in fact, I think that's where most people make the mistake. That's where most people make the They don't ask themselves that question, right? They see all these glorified opportunities. They see, screenshots of Shopify sales or Amazon sales or, ebook sales or this and that. And automatically they're like, yeah, I want to do it, right? So they have this shiny object syndrome where they see these great numbers, they get super intrigued, dopamine spikes, but they fail to take the time to properly assess the opportunities, the risks, the rewards, right? The inputs that things are going to require, which is their first mistake. So let's kind of begin on that topic, right? There's a few things to consider when you're kind of deciding what route to go. Do you go into sales, right, and join an established business, or do you start from scratch with the hopes of making it? Like, you guys have heard this before, 95% of startups fail. So in order for you to believe that you are going to be one of the 5%, I think it's even less actually, I think it's like 99% fail, whatever the number is, 1%, 5% that do succeed, in order for you to actually believe that you're going to start a business and it's going to be successful, either number one, you have a high ego, which is possible, which is okay, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Your testosterone's probably too high. Number two, you might have some narcissistic traits. And number three, you probably got influenced by an online coach or an influencer who told you that, hey, you could do 1, 2, 3 simple steps and you'll make a ton of money. Okay, so that's the first thing, right? I want you to realize. Now, objectively speaking, if we take sales and we compare it to business, what is kind of the biggest difference? All right, assuming all factors being even, the biggest kind of difference between starting in one of the two is the element of risk, right? It's really that simple. With sales, typically speaking, I mean, unless you're joining a startup, but again, they usually have some track record. With sales, you're joining an established business with an established track record. So, you're joining somebody who's got all the puzzle pieces together basically, and you're plugging in and joining a process that's already built out, everything's ready to go. All you have to do is, learn the product, learn what you're selling, and pound dials, right? So you're joining somebody who's already done the market research and the proof of concept for you. Right now, look, I'm not here to tell you that every business, if you go sell for them, is gonna have the best sales process and it's gonna be super easy and you're gonna be speaking to hot leads. That's definitely not the case, absolutely not. But the proof of concept is already there, right? Whereas if you're starting, a business on your own, you got to prove to yourself, number one, that it works. You got to figure out, what you're selling, how you're selling it. You have all these hats that you got to wear, right? You got to figure out marketing. You got to figure out sales. You got to figure out your website. You got to figure out social media. You got to, there's all these hats that you got to wear, and you probably haven't done it before. So the learning curve is exponentially higher because there are so many moving pieces and so many elements and hats that you have to wear. I started my first business when I was 16, and frankly, I didn't have the knowledge that I have right now. Thankfully, things kind of worked out in a way where it ultimately led me down the sales route, but it could have not been that way, right? I didn't know that it's gonna lead me to sales, right? But if you think about it, look, I was 16, I had nothing, absolutely nothing to lose. I had time, so I was like, yeah, let's go, let's rock, right? But most people aren't in that situation. So let me kind of put this back on you, Rome, because you started when you were what, like 27, 26?
26.
26, around there. So like, you actually, had something to lose.
Absolutely.
You had a degree, right? You had an education, you had a real job, what, as people would say. So like, you weren't like me where I'm like, I don't care what I do, I'll do something because I got nothing to lose, right? So let me ask you, when you were starting out and you had all these like images of coaches and Shopify and Amazon, you name it,
right?
What was it for you that made you realize like, hey, I can't really take on all that risk, right? What was it for you that you kind of saw or you came across that made you realize like, let me join an established business?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's more the things that I didn't see.
Yeah.
It just looked great. Like, I want to own a business, have all that freedom. That's the furthest from the truth.
Yeah.
I didn't realize I'm going to have to learn prospecting. I didn't realize I have to learn sales, marketing, operation, managing people. That's in itself. And by the time I got to the second level of skill in one of these things, I was burnt out. And then I realized, I'm like, why am I doing all this when I could just, I think that sales is one of the most valuable skill in life and business, period. Yeah. And if I want to get into business, I'm like, I'll put that on the back burner for now. Let me go and learn sales and piggyback on a business that's already well established and just take sales calls off of their plate. Yeah. Learn the skill, look how they operate, how they manage people, how the system works. And then if I want to, a few years later, I can go start my own business.
100%. And I think that's kind of one thing people forget about. I mean, you look at most billionaires. I know Mark Cuban off the top of my head, he was selling garbage bags, right? At the end of the day, sales, right? I did some research. I've read some, articles. Most billionaires and even multimillionaires at one point were in sales or even started with sales. So I'm not even going to talk about the fact that it's the most valuable skill, because if you're on Rome's YouTube channel or if you've seen any of my content, you probably already know that. you probably already know the value of, having sales skills as a whole. But it's, more than anything, I want you to realize, like, look, if you are in this position, if you're at a kind of fork in the road, I need you to turn off everything you see on social media, turn off Instagram, turn off YouTube, turn off Facebook, and ignore all the ads you've seen, and really take the time and ask yourself, why am I getting into this? And really understand yourself and your position. Like, if you're in a position in life where you got all the time in the world, you have a little bit of money saved up, and you're ready to risk it all, and you probably will lose it all if you're getting into business, then sure, maybe business is for you, right? And again, I know I sound like I'm kind of shitting on that, but that just because for most people, that's probably not the best decision. On the contrary, if you're kind of at the same fork in the road and you're in a position where you don't have all the time in the world, you might not be 15, 16, 17, or 20 years old, and you are looking for something with a high probability of success, then sales is probably, the way to go. So that's kind of like the first step, right? The first kind of consideration. Where are you in life? What's your risk tolerance? If your risk tolerance is high, yeah, sure, start a business. If your risk tolerance is low, or even not necessarily your risk tolerance being low, but if you're somebody who's like wants something that's already worked, then probably sales is the route to go. One of my mentors told me, why draw what you could trace, right? And I think that's the case with sales, right? Sales is proven to work. You're joining established businesses, whereas with building your own business, you're drawing when you could be tracing, right? So that's kind of the first kind of, we'll call it consideration, that I think everyone should really think about. That's day one or even day zero of your career. Now let's talk about kind of the next step, building, right? So next step, you've decided whether you want to go in sales or you want to, build your own business. Now you have either one skill to learn or 50 different hats to wear, right? So let's talk about that for a little bit, Rome. At the point in your life, where, and probably people watching this video maybe know your story a little bit, but give them a little bit of context anyway. At the point in your life where you were you in a position to wear all those hats?
Absolutely not. I come from an engineering background. I used to be a network engineer at IBM. I had no experience with business, no business acumen whatsoever. But I've always wanted that freedom. And I always thought that the only way to do that is for me to go and start a business.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know if you remember the webinar days. I would sit on looking for a way out, sitting webinar after webinar. Hey, if you want to come get rich with e-commerce, watch this webinar, I'll show you how. If you want to be rich with real estate, watch this webinar, I'll show you how. And I was sitting on webinar after webinar. And then, I'm like, why don't I, I'm sure there's a way to actually sell, there's a lot of people, there's thousands of people on this webinar.
Yeah.
So I'm like, how can I get into contact with these business owners and try to figure out a way to sell it for them? And that's how you and I connected.
Yeah. Now let me ask you though, why did you kind of want to be on that side? Why didn't you want to be like all the, everyone watching the webinar and build your own business? Like, what was it about it that kind of deterred you? Because, it seems like you kind of realized right away, like, let's go sales, right? But why didn't you want to dive into building your own business? What was it that kind of made you think twice?
I tried it.
Okay.
I tried an e-commerce business. I've spent over $15,000 on a dropshipping business. Okay. Selling dropshipping products from China. Yeah. I tried a marketing agency, spent a lot of money on that. Yeah. I tried Airbnb. It was successful at one point. I had at one point 9 Airbnbs. So I would rent apartments and put on Airbnb. Yeah. It required absolutely no skill level. Just because I did this 7 years ago. It was a gray area. Yeah. And then the reason why I'm like, I'll turn into sales is this. I was doing so good with Airbnb, and then one day the mayor in Ottawa in Canada decided to set some rules. Yeah. Some regulations. So I was getting kicked out of one Airbnb, out of another Airbnb. Yeah. I went again, I started another e-commerce business just to try it out. It was Amazon FBA. Yeah. And I did well. I piggybacked off of somebody's product. He did really, really good. And then I started getting death threats from Chinese suppliers in my mail, in my address. And they would order my product and contaminate it. And I would get shut down from Amazon for 3 months for an investigation. No, that's crazy. That's why I was like, this. Yeah. And that's why I'm like, you know what? I've always wanted to learn sales, and more than anything, it was because I grew up, not to get into too much detail, but I grew up a very socially awkward kid, very insecure. And deep inside, I've always wanted to do sales, but I was always afraid. And then my best friend told me, like, you're young, you got nothing to lose. And then
you already lost it all with e-commerce.
Exactly. Like, not only I would make a lot of money,
Yeah.
but also start getting my way with life, professional and personal.
Yeah.
And you know, I embraced the journey with its ups and downs, and took every negative experience and turned it into a positive. And here we are today.
Yeah, no, that's huge. I think a lot of people kind of forget to think about those things. They forget to think about, you know, the complexities, right? You know, you see the ads all the time, and some of these people are clients, and the truth is they make it seem easier than it really is. Look, at the end of the day, I mean, I'm not saying it's not for anyone. I'm not saying everyone should get into sales, right? But really take the time and consider those things. Consider that there's a lot of moving pieces. Consider the fact that you will have to go through the highs and the lows and the peaks and the valleys. Now, that's not to say you don't have that in sales. You definitely do, but there are things that are in your control, which is exactly, you know, what I want to talk about next. With sales, yes, you're a lone wolf, and yes, sometimes it might get exhausting, but at the end of the day, you really do have full control of your income, which is one of the things that I love about sales as a whole, right? If you want to close more deals, if you want to make a little bit of extra money, get on more calls, make the dials, make that extra dial, make that extra push. With business, you know, if you are, you know, struggling, right? If you're not getting as many sales as you want, if you're not getting as many customers through the door, well, guess what? You either got to spend money on ads or you got to do something else, right? So it's money, 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 money. Whereas with sales, it's effort, right? So I think the biggest differentiator between the two is, what do you have the most of right now? Do you have a ton of money to spend and invest? Or do you have a lot of time and work ethic and determination right now that you could invest, right? So it's either a time investment or a monetary investment. Well, actually, with business, you got to both invest the money and the time, right? It's both. I think that's another thing to really consider. The next thing I want to talk about here is earning potential. And you probably heard like mixed feedback. You've probably heard, you know, your whole life that rich people are, you know, shitty people. You've probably heard also that money buys happiness, money doesn't buy happiness, which is a whole other video we could do. And another thing you've probably heard is mo money, mo problems. I don't know if you've heard it in a rap song or if you heard it as real advice, but I'll tell you it's absolutely true. More money does mean more problems, but they're different problems, right? And frankly, do I prefer to have the problems that I have now after I've made money? Absolutely, they're better problems to have, but the problems don't go away when you start making money. In fact, when you're building a business and you have all these moving pieces, things only get more and more and more and more complicated. Whereas with sales, at the end of the day, if you're in sales, you're a lone wolf. The only problems you got are mental up here, blocking you sometimes. Sometimes, you know, you have mental blocks. Sometimes you don't push yourself. Sometimes you get complacent. But it's all mental and it's within your control. And at the end of the day, if your goal is to make job replacing income, no matter how much it is, 5 grand a month, an extra couple grand a month, 10 grand, 20, 30, 40, 50, whatever it is, sales will generally be the more attainable path. Not always, but generally speaking. So I've been at points where I made a lot of money when I was 16, 17. I was making 6 figures a year. I've been at points where I made a lot more than that. I don't really like to talk, you know, personal numbers on stuff like on camera especially, but I've had, you know, a lot of highs and a lot of lows, we'll call it that. I'll tell you this, the best time, the most balanced, we'll call it, time in my life was when I was making about 20 grand a month. It was enough to pay the bills, it was enough to do the fun things, it was enough to go out and party and go to the best restaurant, take care of my friends, but I was still working for myself. I didn't have any staff. I didn't have, you know, this office. I didn't have rent to take care of every month. I didn't have people messaging me all the time, asking me questions. I didn't have all the headaches that come with being a business owner. And now I do. And yes, I make more money now, but I also have a lot more headaches now. So, you know, back to that, Rome, you weren't 18 when you started. You had responsibilities, both financial and, you know, others as well. You know, my question to you is like, again, I don't want to sound redundant here, but at the point in your life where you kind of were, you know, at this fork, were you in a position to kind of drop everything, all your responsibilities, and focus on, you know, building a business?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, most people aren't. Tell us a bit more.
I'm the oldest from three brothers,
I
so a
know.
lot of responsibility.
Tell them, I know.
Got three little brothers, and I'm the eldest. And I was at that point when I was 26, my dad just got laid off. And so everybody's just looking at me. So I have a lot of responsibility, and everybody's looking up to me, all my moves, what I'm gonna do. So I have to think about everything I'm gonna do, right? I had a lot to risk. So that's also another reason why I went into sales, is because I'm like, this is, there's a lot less risk. I don't have to put a lot of money up front, and I can work with a well-established business and develop my sales skills. And not only that, but the biggest thing that sales taught me is, especially on 100% commission, is to show up every single day, because you eat what you kill. And that teaches you to show up day in and day out, no matter what.
Yep.
And it's untapped potential. The commission is uncapped. Yeah, and so I knew everybody was relying on me, looking up to me. So I'm like, I set myself a goal. I'm like, this is my goal. Make sure that my actions are aligned with my goals every single day, no matter what, so that if I do all this work and if I look back, it would be impossible for me not to succeed. And that's exactly what I did. Yep. And it paid off tremendously. And I'm very grateful for this opportunity, for you bringing me onto this.
I remember when you used to live in Ottawa, and you were telling me about the financial struggles, with your family and all this stuff. Dude, like, I remember when you would come here, and I could see it in your work ethic. When I see Rome making more dials than usual, working extra hours, I know that it's because he's got things to take care of. See, the most important thing, really, if I want you to, take one thing away from this, is that with sales, your work ethic will directly translate into your income. With starting a business, your work ethic may directly translate into your success, or it may also not. And that's the reality that we don't often hear, because that's not the sexy thing. The sexy thing is like, hustle, 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 and you'll make all the money, and you'll have the Lambos, and you'll have the chicks, and you'll have all this stuff, but you might also not. And that's what a lot of people kind of hide. They don't say. And look, I don't want to tell you that you're going to fail. It's definitely not the message I'm trying to send here. But if you're looking for something where your work ethic will most typically translate into your earnings and your income, then sales is probably the route for you to go.
Absolutely. And who's to say that if you don't get into sales, you're not be able to get those cars, those houses, the woman, if that's what you're after? It is possible. In fact, I think it is a lot easier to get what you really want through that route, in my opinion, and from my experience, because it teaches you how to talk to people, teaches you how to get your way in life with personal, professional, with girls, with getting deals, just getting your way in life overall.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off that too, like, keep this in mind, guys. It's really just math at the end of the day. If you want to make 6 figures a year in sales, you know that you need to make $300 a day. Okay, that's one deal a day at $3,000 at 10% or 15% commission. Okay, that's it. If you want to make that same 6 figures, called 100 grand in business, you got to work so much harder, because now you don't just have to make 100 grand. You got to, make, I don't know, 5, 6, 700, depends on the business, right? Restaurants, for instance, restaurant owners, they're jumping off the walls if they're operating at 15% margin, right? So that means that you're looking at $700,000 in business that you're entirely responsible for generating if you're that business owner.
Absolutely, absolutely. A lot of people say like, oh, I made $1 million a month. Do you know how much they take home after expenses, after paying their employees, after paying for all the softwares that they have and shipping, handling, all that stuff? It really amounts to, is it really worth it at the end of the day? I mean, I like that you bring that up, because we've done hundreds of thousands of sales calls. And till this day, almost every single day, we will get a successful entrepreneur who's like, dude, I've had it with my business. I'm burnt out. I'm done with this. I want to just sell for a business that's doing well, take a cut, take 10% off of multi-million-dollar business, and I'll be happy. Sign me up, bro.
One of our clients, and also a good friend of mine and partner as well, I'm really grateful for. His name's Eric Spofford. He sold his business a couple of years ago for over $100 million. And, in his position, I mean, look, this isn't to say that he didn't put in a lot of work, but For him to make the money that he did, he had hundreds of employees. But one thing that he teaches me is the importance of setting up, organizational structures with managers and, different tiers within an organization. You ain't doing that, and you cannot afford to do that until you're making millions of dollars. And until you're at that point, guess who's the salesperson? Guess who's the marketing person? Guess who's the customer service person? Guess who's the manager? Guess who's the virtual assistant? Guess who's on the phone 24/7? Guess who's responsible for everything? You, right? So to get to the same kind of place in your career as a business owner where you can kind of lay back a little bit, spend more time relaxing as you could in sales, you got to work a lot longer and a lot harder. Okay. Rome, I think you told me you have one more question for me.
Yeah.
Before it slips your mind and mine, let's get into it.
Yeah. So the question is, if you could do this all again, would you do it differently?
It's funny. I had a feeling that one was coming. Rome didn't tell me what questions he's gonna ask me because he wanted to make this as authentic as possible. But the moment I said, Rome, what was your question? I had a feeling that was coming. That was crazy. It shows how well I know you. I have to think about that one. I mean, I'll tell you this, just to keep it raw and authentic. First thing that comes to mind is, would I do things differently? Yes. But I'll tell you what I would do differently. I, started with door-to-door, built that business. Then I got into e-commerce and this, all this stuff. And yeah, I worked on my sales skills and, gone through a lot of the personal development stuff. If there's one thing I would do different is transition from sales every single day to being the business owner a lot later, right? Like when you guys were on calls all day long with the biggest client we've ever had, and we still have, and you guys were on calls, and I was not so much on the sales floor anymore because I had all these other tasks that I took on for myself. If I could change one thing, I would go back and keep doing the sales. Just like what I said earlier, in terms of like this glorified thing of being a business owner. I'm like, yeah, I'll hire people, they'll be under me, I'll make that, override commission.
Yeah.
Man, I'd much rather, even right now to this day, I'd much rather be out there on the sales floor with you guys for 12 hours a day than do most of the that I do now.
Yeah.
Most of the that I do now, I do because I have to do and not because I like doing it. Right? But there are things that need to be done in order for the business to be successful and all of us here to be successful, right? So to answer your question, is there something I would do differently? I would do the sales longer rather than, transitioning to the business owner and operator role, which I thought I had to do,
Right.
but I could have done a lot later.
Right.
On that though, that's kind of for myself. What I would have done differently, I'll tell you what you guys should do differently if you're watching this video, to leave off on like a little word of advice. My word of advice is stop listening to all the you see on social media. 90% of it is not true. Most of the numbers you see and most of the lifestyle stuff you see is insanely glorified. Remember that the single most important skill for you to succeed in business is communication and psychology, which is sales, number one. And remember, number two, that no matter which route you choose to go, whether it's business or sales or whatever else, there's one thing that you need for all of those things for you to become successful. And that one thing, that one word is discipline. Okay. A lot of people get into, business because they think that they're not going to have to make calls all day long, which shows me that they lack discipline, right? But the reality of it, even if you're going into business, you're going to have to have an insane amount of discipline for you to be successful. And Rome's seen this for me. I don't have to do the amount of work that I do. I don't have to do nearly as much of the that I do, but I do it because I'm disciplined, right? Yeah. So that's kind of one piece of advice for you. Think about those things that we talked about. I hope if you're kind of at that fork in the road at this point in your life, it gives you a little bit more clarity and it gives you a couple things to at least think about. And, if sales is the route you want to go, you're in the right place. If business is the route that you want to go, no hard feelings. We're here to, you'll still need sales, so we're here to help. But, hopefully you got some value out of this.
Absolutely. I think it's clear whether in business or in sales, the takeaway here is, success hinges on aligning with your personal goals, understanding the risk and rewards, and embracing the journey with its ups and downs. This is something that you told me. Success leaves clues.
And failure leaves clues as well.
Exactly. So, well, thank you, Dylan, Thank you for your
Thank
kind
you,
words.
baby.
I appreciate you. Hopefully you guys found this video valuable. And if you did, like and comment, subscribe. It's going to help out a lot with the channel. And we'll see you in the next one.
Subscribe, guys. I'll shoot more content for you guys. I'll hop in with Rome and I'll make sure we change your lives. Peace.
Ciao.